Before I begin my story, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and give this video a like. It really helps me share more stories like this one with you. My name is Anna, and this is the story of how love found me in the darkest season of my life, a story of struggle, heartbreak, and the kind of love that doesn't just survive storms, but grows stronger because of them. I was 24 when my life first began to unravel. Up until then, I had lived with the quiet belief that if I worked hard, kept my head down, and dreamed big, things would fall into place. I had graduated with a degree in marketing, found a modest but steady job at a publishing company, and even moved into a small apartment I could barely afford, but loved with all my heart. What I didn't have was love. Relationships had come and gone, leaving me with the kind of bruises only the heart can see. I told myself I didn't need anyone, that independence was enough. But deep down, I longed for something more, someone who could see past my walls and understand the mess and beauty inside me. It was around this time that my mother fell ill. At first, it was just fatigue, something we all brushed off as overwork. But then came the tests, the appointments, the grim expressions of doctors who tried to hide what we already suspected: cancer. I remember sitting in the sterile hospital room as the doctor explained treatment plans, side effects, and survival rates. The words blurred into noise. All I could see was my mother, my strong, stubborn, beautiful mother, shrinking into the hospital bed. Her eyes glassy with tears she tried not to let fall. I became her caretaker overnight. My mornings were spent at work, my evenings at the hospital, my nights awake, worrying about bills, about test results, about how much time we had left. Friends stopped calling. Life shrank into a tunnel of exhaustion and fear, and then he appeared. Michael was a volunteer at the hospital. He was 27, tall, with messy brown hair and a smile that carried warmth even into the coldest days. I noticed him first in the waiting room, carrying a tray of tea and biscuits, offering them with a gentleness that made people smile, even in their pain. The first time we spoke, I was sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria, trying to choke down cold coffee. He approached with that same warm smile. "You look like you could use something stronger than that," he said, placing a cup of tea in front of me. I remember laughing bitterly. "Unless you've got a cure for cancer in there, I doubt it." He didn't flinch. He just sat down across from me. No cure, but maybe a distraction. And that was the beginning that Michael and I began to cross paths more often. Sometimes in the cafeteria, sometimes in the quiet hallways, sometimes in the small garden outside the oncology wing. He listened when I needed to vent, made me laugh when the heaviness became unbearable, and reminded me that even in the middle of despair, life still held tiny sparks of light. He shared pieces of himself too. He told me he had lost his father to cancer years ago, that volunteering was his way of giving back, of honoring the man he missed every day. There was sadness in his eyes when he spoke of it, but also strength. Without meaning to, I began to look for him. His presence became an anchor, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. One night, after a particularly brutal round of chemotherapy, my mother was in unbearable pain. I sat beside her, holding her hand as tears slipped down her face. I felt helpless, broken, furious at the universe for its cruelty. When I stumbled out of her room hours later, drained and trembling, Michael was there. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms, and I collapsed into them, sobbing like a child. He held me for what felt like hours, his shirt damp with my tears, his hands steady against my back. That was the moment I realized Itai was falling in love with him. But love felt impossible. How could I think about romance when my mother was fighting for her life? When bills piled up on my counter, when I barely had the strength to breathe some days. So I pushed it down. I convinced myself it was gratitude, not love, dependence, not affection. I told myself I couldn't afford to risk my heart not now, but love has a way of seeping through the cracks. No matter how hard you try to contain it. One rainy evening, Michael walked me home after a late hospital visit. The city streets glistened under the lamplight, and my umbrella had long since given up the fight against the wind. When we reached my door, I turned to thank him, but the words caught in my throat. He was looking at me differently. "Anna," he said softly, "I know this isn't the right time, and maybe it's selfish of me, but I can't keep pretending. I care about you more than I should." My heart stopped. "I know you're hurting. I know your world is falling apart, but I also know what it's like to go through this alone. And I don't want you to feel that way not when I'm right here." Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, but fear silenced me. So I whispered the only truth I could manage: "I'm scared." He took my hand, squeezed it gently. "So am I. But maybe we don't have to be scared alone." From that night on, things shifted. We didn't call it love, not yet, but there was an understanding, a quiet intimacy that grew in the spaces between grief and exhaustion. He brought me coffee in the mornings, walked me home at night, sat beside me in the garden when I couldn't bear the walls of the hospital anymore. It wasn't grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was steady, constant, patient love. The kind that doesn't demand, but offers. And slowly, I let myself fall. Despite everything. Despite the treatments and the prayers. My mother passed away 6 months later. The day she died, I thought my world had ended. I sat in that hospital room, staring at her still body, unable to breathe. But Michael was there. He held my hand through the funeral, through the endless paperwork, through the nights I screamed into my pillow from the pain of it all. Grief nearly destroyed me, but his love, quiet, patient, unwavering, kept me afloat. It wasn't until months later, when the sharpest edges of grief had dulled, that I finally admitted what had been true all along. We were sitting in the same garden outside the hospital, the place where so much of our story had begun. I turned to him, heart pounding, and whispered, "I love you, Michael." He smiled soft, relieved, as if he'd been waiting to hear those words forever. "I know," he whispered back. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you with that terrible coffee." We laughed, we cried, and for the first time in years, I felt hope again. It's been 4 years since that day. Michael and I are building a life together. It's not perfect, no life ever is. We've faced financial struggles, lingering grief, and the scars that never fully heal, but through it all, we've chosen each other, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. It doesn't need everything to be easy or bright. Sometimes, love is the hand that holds you steady in the storm, the voice that reminds you to keep breathing, the anchor that keeps you from drowning. Michael was that for me. He still is. And I will never stop being grateful for the love that saved me in the hardest time of my life. If you felt touched by this story, please don't forget to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and give this video a like. Your support helps me share more stories like this one. Thank you for listening.